Greetings from Ann Arbor, Michigan, a great state and a great place of the great USA. Welcome to our podcast series, and I am promising you that this series is going to be very enlightening, very inspirational, a lot of fun, and something that will really, I think, help you as you walk your path to holiness. This series is going to have a lot of different things that you probably have questions about, but maybe had the opportunity to ask, especially about religious life. Like, what do they do all day? Who are they? Where do they come from? What's it like when a young woman enters religious life? So stay tuned as we will discuss where sisters come from today. Welcome back to our Dominican Sisters of Mary Mother of the Eucharist podcast series. And I am going to talk to you today about what does a young woman, and I know there are some of you out there watching this, and some of you parents who know your daughters are like this, what does a young woman who is considering a possible religious vocation do? That's a good question. And that's not something that you should necessarily know the answer to, because unfortunately, or very sadly, there aren't a lot of religious sisters visible in the world today. And so you women have to kind of go find them. And the men can find a priest when they go to Mass on Sunday and stop and say, Father, can I come and talk to you at some point in time? And if his personality and yours don't exactly match, that's okay. You can go to another Catholic church, find another priest, and you know where they are. But for you women, you girls, that can be more difficult. But it's really not that difficult. And I'm going to tell you why. Our community, when it was founded, began these retreats. They're very specific vocation discernment retreats. We began them for people like you who are discerning and trying to say, God, how can I know? I don't ever think it's wise, as the vocation director for our community, I always say, don't go running around at every single religious community you can find. Not only will you use up your time and your money, you will become very discouraged because there's beautiful communities out there. You have to, first of all, take it to prayer and get it down to a workable number. I usually say pretty much 3. Now, you might say, well, gosh, how in the world am I going to pick 3 when I've looked on the internet and I've put in the things that I really do want? Perhaps you want Eucharistic adoration daily. Perhaps you want, certainly, Marian consecration. You might put in teaching or nursing or whatever. You might put in wearing a religious habit. You might put in a variety of things that seem very important to you should you decide to give your life to this community. You are entrusting yourself to them, to their rule and their constitutions, to their way of life, for you to become a saint. And every spirit is unique as God created. But we realize in the family of the church, our spirit fits into a particular manner of prayer. So it might be Dominican, such as myself. It might be Franciscan. It might be Augustinian, Carmelite. For you guys, it might be Jesuit. It might be, there are so many groups out there. And then if we go into communities, we see Mother Teresa's community. We see the Sisters of Life. We see the Mercy Sisters. We see such a wide variety of communities out there. If I were to try to list them, I would go on forever, and this would be the entire episode. And I think you can certainly do that by using your own brain, getting on the internet, and putting in the things that seem to appeal to you. Now, in saying that, I'm realizing it's still a formidable task to do that because there are a lot of beautiful communities. So, and you might say, I don't know enough about them to know what my particular spirituality really is. So how do I begin this huge task? My suggestion is make a good vocation discernment retreat. At this point, I will begin talking about our vocation discernment retreats. They are incredible retreats. Each year, we have 3 of them offered. And so you can look on our website, which is Dominican Sisters, which is Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist, and you can look there and find the dates of the next upcoming vocation discernment retreats. Basically, we made them very simple. They're kind of like user-friendly. You fly into the Detroit airport sometime on Friday, or if you're driving, you can drive right straight to us on Saturday. They're held at our school, Spiritualities Academy. All this information is on our website, sistersofmary.org. But I want to kind of walk you through one of these retreats. We pick you up at the airport. We bring you to the mother house. Immediately, you are immersed in a very good, strong, fast-growing, solid religious community. You begin to say, could this be my life? And later on, you kind of say, could it be Dominicans? Could it be Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist? But let's take it slowly and say, could I see myself living a religious life? Does this seem to be the completion of my heart? Because my heart was formed by God incomplete, because I need another, in the words of the great St. John Paul II. He would say in his Theology of the Body, our hearts are formed incomplete. Who's to be the rest of my heart? Who's to bring my heart into its completion so I will know heaven and know God when I see him face to face in heaven? That's your vocation. That's your pathway. That's the way you give your heart. And if you say, perhaps I've dated, or I certainly know a lot of guys and they're wonderful, and of course I like them, that means you're normal. Very good. Because if you're not normal, I doubt religious life is really going to help you a whole lot. So if you like guys, that's positive. I certainly did. And yet I didn't like them enough to make only one. I've often laughed and said if I could have had a dozen, maybe I would have thought about it a little bit more. But I couldn't. And this one would never be enough, no matter who he was. So I said, it's you, God. Because in you, I have everyone, every man and every woman as my sister or brother, or in my teaching apostolate, I began to realize as my son or daughter, another relationship that's very important for each of us, to know someone whom we trust and look up to, loves us and prays for us and guides us. And as I said, we do trust them to bring us into greater holiness. And so these vocation discernment retreats, they bring together young women from literally all over the world. We have 3 each year. They're usually in November, in February, and in April. So when I say each year, I'm referring to the school year because that's when most young women are most discerning. If you're waiting till summer to really get busy, you're probably not going to have enough time to prepare yourself to do anything should you realize which community it might be. That could be sudden. Can it happen? Yes. But usually we discern for a while. We pray. We talk to others who have wisdom. We might have a spiritual director, or we might not be blessed with a spiritual director. That's not a necessity. It's a help. But we have other people that we look up to, and we can talk to sometimes our parents. Sometimes our parents don't quite understand it, but we want to bring them along in our vocational journey to the degree that they would be willing to walk it with us. We certainly want to establish a relationship with some people who will help us the most. In these vocation discernment retreats, since I'm the vocation director, that relationship would be established with me if the young woman chooses to do that. And you might say, what do you do? These, believe it or not, are only 24 hours. So you can come in on Saturday. They begin at 2 o'clock on Saturday, and they end at about 3 o'clock, so that's 25 hours actually, on the following Sunday. But they are so packed with so much information, so much inspiration, that the girls will say at the end of these, oh my goodness, we did so much and so much happened. I can't believe it was just 24 hours. And yet, while we are leading you along a pathway of openness through various conferences, wonderful films, speakers, recreation times together where we just plain old have fun, and you've got to be at one of these before you really know what fun is in this sense. They are incredible. Through the sacraments, we certainly have the Mass, obviously, if you come on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday Mass. If you come on Saturday, we have the Sunday Mass, and we also have confession, and we encourage every young woman to go to confession, even if she has been recently. Clean your soul and just This is the preparation for what? For the night. The night is all night Eucharistic adoration. And this is when it's total silence. You bring your sleeping bag and you sleep on the floor. See how well we treat you, because we get down to the basics of, are you open to hear God speak? God isn't silent. And you might say, well, he is to me. No, he really isn't. There's some blockage that you've got to come to honesty with. You've got to know yourself. Self-knowledge is essential before you will know your vocation. Who really am I? Not who do people say I am, or who does someone else think that I might be, or who have my teachers always said I was, or who do my parents always seem to think, or even sometimes who do I act like I am? None of that may be the real you. You have to say, who am I as God made me? That takes a deep prayer. That takes silence. That takes sitting before Jesus and asking, God, who did you make when you created me? Where is my heart set? How do I come home to you? Do I need another person in my life as an icon of you? In which case, that's the married vocation, that the icon meets another icon and the two become one. And through that lens of the beautiful sacrament of marriage, more children are brought into the world, if that be God's plan. And certainly these two become saints because they work on each other's holiness in the day in and day out. And they need that physical presence of another person who completes them and loves them deeply in the good and the bad days. That's probably the vocation most people are called to. And it's beautiful, and it needs to really go, you need to go into that vocation, if that should be yours, with a lot of prayer. And so you might say, what's a vocation discernment retreat going to do for me if I decide marriage? This is what you will hear from me. You start praying immediately for your future spouse, and that you will know him if you're a woman, her if you're a man, that you will know this person as soon as you meet them, because the sooner this relationship can begin, then the more you can pray for each other and walk the path together and recognize the beauty of marriage if this is indeed the divine plan. Now, you might say, I've dated a lot. I love guys. I really am attracted to that, and I would certainly love to be a physical mom. But sister, why is it my heart never seems to settle on that? Am I not normal? I would say you're totally normal. You have a different vocation, very possibly, to religious life. What's the word that I hear most common from young women as they sit in front of me that do have a religious vocation? Sister, I don't know what it is, but somehow I just never seem to be able to give God enough. And I don't think that marriage would be enough for me. I just keep wanting to give him more. What is the more? And I'm like, that's a very common question of saying, do you think I could have a religious vocation? Am I called to belong entirely to him? Again, St. John Paul the Great used the icon of the Transfiguration for religious life, that we see Christ, but we see him in a glorified manner, even here on earth, through religious vocation, through our religious vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And those vows become kind of a template by which we walk a certain path with our ruling constitutions of our particular community. But we walk it with a total dedication and a desire that everyone around us becomes holy too. And so people will say, but don't you miss your own children? I think a true maternal heart would always say, yes, with great joy. And if that seems strange, why the joy? Because that's the beauty of the gift we can give to God. No one likes a gift given by a sad person who says, here it is, take it, you wanted it. I mean, is that really supposed to bring us joy and lift us up? I mean, we would probably say, keep it. You know, you're too selfish to give that to me. You keep it. You obviously want it more than I do, because it's a fake. And we recognize that. When we make our vows to God, we literally bring our entire selves to him with a tremendous joy, saying, I only know the present moment, but I promise you, I will be with you for all the future because you are faithful. And I kind of sometimes laugh and say to my friends who are getting married, Or they say to me, doesn't it take a lot of faith to make vows? Poverty, chastity, obedience, and religious life. And I go, well, let me ask you a question. Didn't it take a lot of faith to say yes forever in this life to another person who also has original sin? I mean, I'm very much aware of my own original sin. I see it a lot, you see, and I really try to work to become a saint using the person God made me to be with this failings that I have, with these weaknesses that I have. They're all part of me, and I don't shun them. They're opportunities to grow in grace. But one thing I don't have to worry about as a religious sister is the fact that my spouse has no problems, and he loves me no matter what. And I can love him because he doesn't do anything wrong, and he always understands me. And as I always say, I don't even have to use words in my prayers. He gets it. He knows it. He knew it probably before I even thought it out, you know? So the beauty of a religious consecration is such a freeing thing. And I think the world does not understand commitment. The world is afraid, and I'm seeing it in young people today. How can I make a commitment? Perhaps they've not seen a commitment, and the two people they love the most, their own parents. Perhaps they've not seen commitment in other people who they look up to and then have let them down at some point. Perhaps their peers don't have commitment in their own lives. And perhaps they say, how am I to have that ability to say to a future spouse or to Christ himself, I will be with you. I will be united to you most intimately for the rest of my earthly existence. How can they do that? This is where we've got to step out of our secular society and realize by baptism we have the graces that raise us above the mundane world we live in, above the newspaper stories, above the radio programs, above the websites and other things that are always trying to show us negativity and then threaten us. And you think you're better than some of these people? By God's grace, every one of us should be good. We were made for goodness. If we're not good, we're the anomaly. It's not if we are good, we're the anomaly. We were made for goodness. We were made with hearts that desire to give themselves away completely. In these vocation discernment retreats, you take those questions before the Eucharist. And you're in there for at least an hour, but I tell you, many of the girls are in there most of the night and some all night long. I always say, but if you drove yourself here, please get some good sleep because I want safety. But in all the many retreats that we have had, the young women have made so many vocational decisions. And even if it's not to totally get it down to this is the particular one, it's the opening to say, I never knew this about myself. I'm on the right path. I'm going to go find out. They also have an opportunity for a 15-minute only one-on-one with me. But if we're having about 150 to 180 young women at these retreats, that's a lot for me to do. But that's essential because they want that direction. And all I want is for them to find God's plan. I don't want anybody to enter my community or any other religious community that doesn't have a religious vocation to that particular community. I don't want anyone to say, well, I guess I need to get married because I'm afraid of religious life. That's not a good motive to do anything out of fear. Again, to be fearful is to put ourselves at a very dangerous place where we will not do the good because we don't ultimately trust God enough. We've got to get, again, over our secularistic decisions that we're the ones who make all the decisions, that we have to, at the end, depend on ourselves because there's nobody out there we can really trust. That's a very flawed and a fatal look at life. God made us a family on purpose. We need to depend on others. We need to stretch out and to help others too. So along the vocational walk, you will walk that with other young women who are thinking the same things. And I put them together on an email after they've left here, and by email they communicate with each other. And it will be about such things as, well, this is what someone said to me. Has anybody ever said that to you? How did you respond? Or my mother's really having a hard time with my vocational decision. Do you have any pointers? And this will be the rest of the girls. And it gets to be a nice sized group that are walking with each other, already developing family skills. That they care for one another. And they really are looking at each other with such love and devotion and respect. I think another important thing is they're beginning to realize that they're entering into a bigger family, a family with a certain spirituality. I mentioned that there are various spiritualities in the church. I can very briefly say the Dominicans really do highlight the intellectual aspect of truth. Our motto is Veritas, the Latin for truth. I could also mention the Franciscans, which you probably already realize highlight poverty. And there are beautiful Franciscan communities. The Benedictines, their motto is Ora et Labora, to pray and to work. And so they have a different aspect of living their lives as the Franciscans and the Dominicans. The Carmelite spirituality has a great deal of mysticism built into their saints. And you know, many Carmelite saints, such as St. Teresa, the Child Jesus, St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, and many others. And all these are the oldest orders in the church. And we could say a lot more about those, but I want to move on into once you begin to realize how you were made by God to give your gifts to the world, if it's through teaching, if it's through caring for the poor, if it's through caring for the sick, and be broad enough to say, God, the spirituality that will set my heart on fire with love of you, whatever that aspect of the activity that they do, or we call it the apostolate, I will do that because that will bring me great joy, because God's bigger than we are. But in that decision, it really takes a lot of prayer. Now, you might say, who can come to these retreats? Sign me up. Again, find them on our website, sistersofmary.org. We say that you have to be at least 16 years old, and you can be into your early 30s. Let me highlight once more the fact that you have a vocation. You have a definite will and a definite way by God's divine providence, whereby if you walk it with great love and joy, you will see him face to face. And it's not just at the end of the day, you'll be a saint in heaven. It's all along the way. You are walking sanctity. As it's said, all along the way is heaven, because Christ said, I am the way. Catherine of Siena, great Dominican mystic. And I love that, to think each day when we get up at 5 o'clock and we begin our day, it's part of the holiness. It's part of my gift to God and to the world. And so these retreats highlight your vocation, whatever your vocation is. And I wish every single young woman would make one of these retreats. Again, they're here at our mother house in Ann Arbor. And once you look at the website, you'll find all the details about them. But I could tell you so many stories. Let me end with one very interesting story of a young woman who found her vocation here. And she was actually 27 years old, and she came and she made the retreat. And unlike, I think, anybody else in the thousands upon thousands that have made these retreats, as I'm doing my one-on-ones, the sisters are knocking at the door saying, this particular young lady is not very happy. And I'm laughing and saying, what do you mean she's not very happy? And they go, well, she's making it known that she really doesn't want to be here. So after I heard this a couple of times, I called her in. Now, this happened to be Sunday morning by the time I was actually able to get her in because of so many others who had already signed up. But I called her in and I said, you didn't ask to see me, but I need to see you. I understand you've not really been a happy camper through this retreat. What's going on inside you? And she goes, I'm not. And I said, I know. So what's going on? And she said, well, my boyfriend brought me here, and I did not want to come to this, but he insisted that I come to this. And so, sister, I didn't want to come, so I've been very sad about that. I said, okay. Is there anything else? And she goes, yes. Last night in Eucharistic adoration, I was praying really hard, and then she starts sobbing. I think God asked me to be his spouse. Now I have 2 men. What do I do about this? I am just so sad, sister. This is just terrible. And so I looked at her and I said, I think I might know what your vocation is. So she hides her face. Oh, I don't think I want to know. And then she goes, well, do you want to say it? And I go, well, are you ready? And she goes, no. And then she goes, okay. Well, just say it. She keeps her eyes closed. And I said, honey, believe me, you have a married vocation. And she said, I do? And she goes, well, why don't you do you really think I do? Well, sister, and she jumped up and hugged me. And she goes, these vocation retreats really do work. And she said, that's what I've always thought. That's what I've always wanted. And she said, you just confirmed it. So she goes dancing out. And then everybody else says, what did you do to her? She is just wild out here in the halls. So at any rate, after the retreat is over, she goes outside and her boyfriend is waiting in the car to pick her up. And so he lets her in. He gets in on the other side. And she just kind of leans back and says, well, sister and I have discovered my vocation. And he says, okay, what is it? And she goes, well, the two of us both agree through a lot of prayer that we believe I'm called to marry. Marriage is my vocation. And so he says, really? And she goes, yes, very nonchalantly. He leans over and opens a box and says, hands her the ring and says, well, then will you marry me? She jumps up. Well, she opens the door. She jumps out. She yells at him, come on, you have to do that again. Remember that exact line. You've got to do that before the Eucharist. Everything is the Eucharist. So they run back into the school. She's yelling through the halls, everybody come meet me. She said, come over here. I'm about to get engaged. So they go running in there, and he proposes to her before the Blessed Sacrament. And then she runs out and says, these retreats really do work. So come, be not afraid. Come find your vocation as God has had it planned for you from all eternity. God bless you. So if you like the material on this particular podcast, then please click on the next podcast for another fascinating story.